Welcome to the Enterprisers. The common story about high achievers is that they secretly fear that they aren't clever enough. This episode is the opposite admission, and a much rarer one. Two men of substantial intellectual firepower sit down to name something almost no one will say out loud. That being demonstrably the sharpest person in most rooms, seeing the pattern first, setting the pace that others cannot match, creates its own specific insecurity. The insecurity of not knowing whether people are agreeing because you're right or because you've stopped trying to disagree. Tim, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio. It's so nice to have you here.
No, it's been it's a pleasure, I hope. Let's see.
Well, we're going to talk about something that you don't talk about very often, and that is in this episode, we're going to talk about being the most intimidating person in the boardroom by being the tallest, because you're both over 6'5", and also by being the most intelligent. So can you expand on your experience of that over the years?
Well, it's nice that you think of me in that way.
You've told me.
I have moments where my modesty goes out the window. It's true. No, I mean, I was a very bright kid, academically, certainly, and I think probably I was a bit weird actually as a result. But so apparently my mother tells me anyway that I was a terror when I was about 6 in the classroom, largely because I was bored and didn't know what to do with myself. And I got moved classes about 3 times until they found a teacher who knew what she was about in terms of handling my bad behaviour. I don't remember this, so I think maybe she was exaggerating. But anyway.
Makes a good story.
It was all kind of fine until maybe I was about 14, 15. And I think to some extent, probably the time when you start getting interested in girls and you become more socially self-conscious and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I sort of realised at some point that my ability to project the conversation forward and anticipate where it's going to end up was a little bit tricky for other people to cope with. It just came across as being really sort of weird and arrogant or abrasive or whatever it was. And of course, at that age, I was a bit self-conscious, not particularly socially confident, not very empathetic and all this kind of stuff. And so, I reacted by learning to just not do it.
Oh, right.
To suppress it because I didn't get really good vibes when I did it. I mean, a classic example is I think I was about 16. I was at home half term or whatever, doing my GCSEs, and I went to the hairdressers. And she's a young lady doing my hair, and she sort of tried to engage me in conversation, which was a big mistake, 16-year-old. I don't want to chat. I want my hair cut, please. Anyway, she's like, "Are you off work then?" I said, "No, I'm just on half term still at school." She's like, "You're still at school?" I was like, "Yeah. What are you doing?" "I'm doing GCSEs." "Okay, and then you're going to get a job after that?" "No, I'm going to do my A-levels." And she went, "Oh," and then she just, I could see her face was just like, don't really want to talk to this guy. And it wasn't her fault. It was because I don't know, I must have projected.
Don't want to talk to you?
Well, probably, because I was probably shy and awkward. Yeah. But I also probably projected a kind of like, what do you mean am I going to get a job? No, of course I'm going to go do A-levels and go to university. What are you talking about? That's my life, but I was obviously self-conscious enough to be aware of this, and so this is an example of where I if I was confident like now, I'd have just engaged and just and carried on and had a chat, whatever. But at that age, you're much more kind of sensitive to it, and so I started to suppress it, particularly in situations. I mean, ultimately, I ended up going to Cambridge University and didn't really need to suppress it there because you're surrounded by people who are probably in the same situation. But even then, in a subsequent work environments, it would sort of manifest itself as self-deprecation, modesty. I've
seen that in you.
Which is a little bit of a British thing anyway.
Yeah. So it's fairly acceptable to do that.
Yeah. Our kind of culture of sarcasm fits very nicely. And that was all fine and actually probably did me all sorts of good in the early part of my career, when actually you need to be a little bit... you need to take responsibility to fit around more senior people, more experienced people. They don't really need to hear the young scallywag being cocky.
Yeah.
And it didn't do me any harm for a long time. But the problem is it became a habit.
Yeah.
And so I realised, even now to some extent, that I'm still doing it as a very experienced 52-year-old.
You're still doing it.
Still doing it when I'm not paying attention. And the problem is that now I have experience and wisdom and maturity and social skills, well, hopefully. I don't need to do it anymore because actually it doesn't do me any favours. And actually, when I'm much more authentic and much more authoritative in myself, I tend to get really good reactions now because I'm able to do it in a way that isn't annoying or abrasive or cocky or whatever.
So what was the fear behind, I mean, I understand as you're growing, as you're growing in the business and you're going up, you don't want to piss people off at a high level.
Yeah.
But when you get there, what was the fear about hiding behind this self-deprecation?
I mean, to be honest, by the time I got there, I don't know that it was conscious anymore. As I said, I think it was just a really deeply ingrained habit. And to some extent, I guess when you're a really quick pattern recognizer, like it's one of my kind of superpowers is I can sort of see what's going on really quickly. There's a tendency to just assume that everybody else can do it too.
Ah, right.
And so by being that way, I thought it was transparently obvious that people could see that I was being excessively modest as a sort of joke, It's a way of saying I'm actually quite bright, but I know that's not the coolest thing to project. So I'm clearly doing this, and of course it doesn't. It doesn't come across that way at all. And so you got this. Well, I personally had this massive blind spot, I guess.
And did you find yourself when you actually were able to recognise your own pattern and stop doing that people were in the room, but they were, because you are intelligent and because you are articulate and because you are tall, you are intimidating. Were people agreeing with you just because of that? Or were they too frightened to disagree with you, do you think?
Well, so I'm not entirely sure I always recognise which one it is, let's say.
Right.
But there have been times I can certainly remember, particularly socially, where I'm more relaxed, maybe a couple of glasses of wine down, and if I just sort of just let it all go and get quite excited, that can be quite intimidating.
Oh, wow,
if people don't know me, because, I tend to get a bit louder, a bit sharper. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I have a number of occasions, even recently, where, I'll use a word and everyone looks at me and they're like, don't actually know what that means. And I kind of like I have to recalibrate in mid-conversation because, I'm one of those guys, if I've heard a word when I was 12, I remember it and I know what it means and I'll just use it because it's a word. Why not? I'm not trying to be cocky or intellectually snobbish about it. It's just the right word, But even now that comes up all the time when I say things and I thought this is the perfect word. It really gets the sort of subtle tone that I'm trying to get across here. And then I realise I've lost the thread,
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when I find that I haven't, if there's a word I don't know, I'll ask.
Yeah, you're very open like that.
Yeah.
Like you're just not worried.
No, I'm not worried if you think
Which
I'm
is
not
exactly
intelligent.
how it should be. I mean, if people were all like that, then this probably would never have happened to me, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, if people were all like that,
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not a victim here. I'm not trying to,
But you wouldn't. You're saying that you wouldn't have developed a pattern to hide it. So you're hiding yourself because you're worried about other people's response to you.
Yeah, and I guess I'd persuaded myself, and it was probably the right thing, as I said when I was younger. But I persuaded myself that this was the way.
That's a waste, though, isn't it? It's a waste in a business situation.
Now that I think about it, totally
isn't it? I mean,
because I think I've only really started to realise this in the last sort of 12 months or so. I mean, and spending time with people like Tim who maybe have had similar journeys and can relate to it and challenge you and call you out on it and say, well, why are you still doing that?
Why are you doing it? And Tim, what you've found yourself kind of backing down in rooms and being less of an imposing person. Why did you do that? Why?
Well, like Nick, it starts young. As a 10-year-old at the top of primary school, I was the only kid over 6 foot tall with size 11 football boots.
Wow.
And you find yourself in the playground and every other kid's dad has said, just pick the biggest one and hit him on the nose.
I think you're showing your age there. Was it? It's 1952.
Pre-war.
Actually about 1968. But it is a long time ago. And so you find and of course bullying was frowned upon. So you found yourself backing off physically in social groups from a really young age. And then, I wasn't academically high flying. I think largely because I was bored. And
you relate to that, don't you?
I did a year at university and found it boring and dropped out and went into business. But by the time I was 25, I was managing a team of, I think, 160 odd people, every one of whom was older than me.
Interesting.
And
intimidated by that or not?
Well, you certainly, there was definitely a psychological impact of doing that. And I think I was probably a really unpleasant, arrogant bastard at the time. But
do you think that was because that was the skill that you defaulted to?
You just, you're doing what I was ambitious, I was able, and I really, and I worked really hard. I worked harder than anybody else I knew, and I wasn't good at suffering fools, and so really, I don't think I would have liked the person I was then if I encountered them for myself.
And do you think, like Nick's experience, that you were finding people were agreeing with you because they were too frightened not to?
Well, I was fortunate to find myself in big corporate. I was on a fast-track management program. I was dealing with senior people who were very much my superior and learning from them. And, you'd get the regular appraisal, and I seem to recall one of them saying, Tim's really bloody good, but he's not quite as good as he thinks he is.
Which is almost the opposite of of Nick's problem.
But that combined with the early experiences does cause you to make a point all the time of just checking it and backing off.
Right.
And so you are constantly denying your potential, which is somehow a loss.
Do you feel like there is that potential that you feel like was not used properly, but equally traditional corporate environments aren't really well set up to embrace that potential?
No, they're not.
There's very much a bit of a conformist, know your place, hierarchy, which there are probably lots of good reasons for it, and it's tried and tested and so on and so forth. But there isn't this.
We've also talked about this in previous episodes that the founder has not necessarily has an ego, and does not necessarily want to be surrounded by people who know more than he does, who are more intelligent than him, although we also recognise the fact that it's actually really good for that founder to have some people who are in a better position.
The founder's a very unique position, isn't it? Because, they have to have some mojo. And in many cases, that mojo manifests itself as, command and control, for example, or I've met and worked with some tremendous narcissists.
I'm sure
that's a tricky one because, to be honest, it doesn't matter what you say or how good you are. If it's not brown nosing, then it's getting you nowhere. But that's quite a unique case. So it's a tricky one for the founders. I think corporate world's a bit different. I think corporate world is a little bit of a strength in numbers situation. So right up until the CEO, there's always several of you at your level, and you fought your way up there, and there's a little bit of you wait your turn.
I was going to say, so as a CEO in a corporate level, you don't necessarily want someone to be better than you.
CEOs at corporate level maybe is a unique position because at that point you're on the hook for everything, and so to be honest, you're minded to just get anyone who can deliver for you in the right place. But, at senior manager level, there's probably a little bit of protectionism. And quite naturally, survival of the fittest type thing.
Yeah.
And maybe incentives aren't always aligned to, and I don't know that we get enough training in the human aspects of leading throughout our careers. To be honest, I certainly didn't get enough. So I see it. I see as there's an environmental issue. Not sure how easy it is to fix, other than having good individuals in leadership positions who, recognise talent and work out what to do with it.
Yeah, but the big move. I mean, I made the move from big corporate and CEO to entrepreneurial in my mid-30s. So I'd spent 5 years in a very big job with, I think I hired 200 directors in 2 years, scaling a business within a corporate. And you come out thinking that you will be God's gift to small business, and then fall flat on your face because you don't realise just how much is done by your support team.
Oh, yeah.
And you things you take for granted in corporate life, just not there. But the big difference for most people these days who found businesses is they start them incredibly soon after education, never experience an appraisal, never get any formal training or guidance in how you get beyond being a doer, problem solver, creative bundle of energy.
Straight into the only job in the world where you don't ever get any feedback.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't regret having a corporate career. I think it was absolutely foundational for me, and the skills and knowledge that I have now that I learned in those 20 odd years. I'm just constantly amazed by how much I know that I just take for granted because I operated in that environment.
Absolutely.
There are best practices that corporates have found.
Yeah. And they train and develop you as well. So.
Yeah.
And of course, the one thing that founders do is reject all of those out of hand because they belong with the evil bastards who run big corporate.
Which is great right up until the point where they start scaling and
exactly
they can't do it. I mean, it was interesting. I was very much a micro control freak until I was about 30, and it was when I moved to my first trading role. Essentially, I was operating in BP oil trading, but I was a sort of mid-office analyst. And then I moved to a role in BP Chemicals where I was responsible for trading a certain chemical product and basically just given a whole bunch of...
Money?
No, a whole bunch of product and assets and said, go and make some money out of this. Using sort of, the stuff that the oil business has developed over the years. And so, suddenly I'm responsible for a P&L and no one's sort of, telling me what to do. I've just got to make money. And so, very simple. Do I buy my product today or do I sell it? You're on your own, right? And the feedback loop is really quick. Oh, I'll buy it. Damn, the price has gone down. Was I wrong? I don't know. Was I wrong? And so you realise very rapidly that decision making, you use a risk management approach. You change your measures of success. You say to yourself, well, as long as I'm up by the end of the year, I'm not going to get every decision right. It took me about 18 months to learn that mindset change. But it also taught me that I couldn't, I had to spend half of my day thinking about the data. What is it telling me? Should I go long or should I go short? Which meant I couldn't do the tracking of the tons. I couldn't do the P&L calculations. I couldn't do the documentation for the ships and the barges and all that kind of stuff. And nor did I need to, because, I was making more than enough money to have people do that. It made sense and they were good at it. And so, within the space of 2 years, I realised there are so many things that need to be done and there are so many people who are better at it than I am. And why don't I just use my skills where they're best used?
So actually, that's a really good message, isn't it? Because one of my questions was going to be, as a founder, CEO of a mid-sized company, how do you let go of the things that you need to let go of to somebody like you or either of you, that's good at the job and could possibly come across as intimidating, and just trust them to do the process?
Well, I think there's a little bit of an act of faith. If you've not had that corporate career, because it's easy to learn delegation in a corporate world because you're not normally as budget constrained. And, it's not really your money at the end of the day. So that makes it a whole lot emotionally easier to deal with.
Yeah.
But to some extent, you only have to look at companies that are 3 times the size of your company and ask yourself, is somebody microcontrolling this whole thing? And the answer is always hell no.
Yeah.
So it's transparently obvious, if you're honest with yourself, that if you want to get bigger, materially bigger, something has to change. You have to, you have to delegate. And I mean, I would always say to people, get the best individual, the most motivated individual with the right attitude, and pay them, okay, not what you can't afford, but pay them whatever it takes to get them, because one shit-hot individual is massively better for you than 5 average people. And I don't mean, lots of people potentially exceptional, but it's about attitude rather than it is about delivery. I mean, now that I've got to the sort of point where I've recruited hundreds of people over the years, I would only ever recruit on attitude now.
Yeah. And do you think your attitude has shifted as you've got older? Because you still are a tall, very intelligent person.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Who can see patterns. Possibly not quite so intimidating.
Well, yeah, I think I'm older and wiser and much more emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but than I was when I was 14, 15 for sure. And so now I realise I can pull it off. I mean, people actually value your insights if you present it, with care.
Yeah.
And you do it for the right reasons. If I say to somebody, look, what I'm seeing is this, and you should do that. Trust me on this. I'm not doing it because of my ego. I'm doing it because I know it's true.
Yeah.
And somehow or other, I guess I can convey that now in a way that I was just not even conscious of needing to when I was younger.
Yeah. So if I as a CEO or a founder of a mid-sized company, actually, it's not about intelligence. Well, it's not about sort of being scared of the intelligence. I'm scared of the person. Actually, it's look at that person and can they do the job? And as you say, if Nick tells you to do something because of this, it's not because he's doing it for ego. It doesn't matter whether he's 6'5" or 5'6". It is because he cares about your company.
I was on a sort of a men's camp walking up Snowdon a few weeks back, and there was sort of 5 or 6 of us. And one of the chaps on this camp was 23 years old. He was running his second business, basically moving commodity metals in East Africa and, selling them in places, 23, right? And he had some, emotional hang-ups about how he wasn't fulfilling his potential and all this kind of stuff. And I just...
23?
I know. And I was just like... Goodness gracious, young man, I have to tell you, you're actually exceptional. And to be clear with you, if I was in a position to give you a job, I wouldn't even need to think about it. I would just give you a job right now. I don't care how old you are.
Yeah.
But, what you've achieved at that age tells me everything I need to know. In fact, another example is my daughter's a junior athlete, and she's won a European title as an under 18. And we were at Brentford Football Club in the boardroom, and there's a director there who's a managing director at JP Morgan, and he knew about my daughter's success, and he came right over and he said, "Well, come and work for us." And she's like, "Oh, hang on,
give you a chance.
I want to do investment banking." And he's like, he said, "Oh, I don't even need to interview you. The fact that you've won a European title tells us everything we need to know."
That's amazing.
We know you're motivated.
Yeah.
We know you know how to do hard work. We know you're, not shy of putting in the effort. You've dealt with pressure and extreme situations. Yeah. The rest of it we can teach.
I was going to say sports. Sports is a great way of getting into business, isn't it? Tim, have you got anything to add to this episode about actually not worrying about what people look like, but just getting the right person for the job?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, all of us, as we go through life, if we're lucky enough to carry on going through life, have to swap our energy for some experience and some wisdom. Because frankly, if we didn't learn some and we ran out of energy, there'd be nothing left. And actually, this is the thing that founders need to understand, is that you quickly need to move from doing everything to being the designer of everything and seeing that the best person gets it done the best so that the whole company moves forward.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't matter who does it, and it certainly doesn't matter whether you do it or not, as long as it gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything to add, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, just, don't be afraid to recognize what your skill set is.
Yeah.
Right? Play to your strengths. You don't need to be brilliant at everything. I'm certainly not.
Nobody is.
No, exactly. And even if you are brilliant at everything, there's probably 2 or 3 things that you're just distinctly better than other people at. And that's true of most founders, otherwise they wouldn't be successful founders.
Yeah.
So play to that strengths and delegate everything else.
Yeah.
Get somebody whose superpower is organising logistics to do your logistics, for goodness sake.
Yeah, true. Absolutely.
Makes sense.
It does. Well, that went really quickly. Thank you very much, both of you. Really enjoyed it.
Me too.